Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Lorenzo Kilgangrandi, and I am the founding director of the City Diplomacy Lab. I am delighted to welcome you to today's peer learning webinar on gender-inclusive approaches to sustainable urban development. This is the fourth episode of the Urban Innovation to Achieve Just and Sustainable Cities series, consisting of 5 webinars co-organized by GIZ on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and Cities Alliance. The series is supported by UN Habitat, Ikbel, the Center for Affordable Housing Finance, the African Union for Housing Finance, and the City Diplomacy Lab. The goal of our series is to foster knowledge exchange between urban communities worldwide and create a roadmap towards the World Urban Forum taking place this November in Cairo. The focus of this session is how to implement gender-inclusive cities that can pave the way for a sustainable urban development. And indeed, in their journey towards sustainability, many urban communities worldwide encounter significant sustainability challenges due to gender segregation in public spaces. With the latter generally designed around the specific needs of men, physical limitations hinder the unfolding of an accessible, safe, and active gender-inclusive public life. Today, we will explore how to transform our cities through gender-inclusive urban planning and construction processes. Our distinguished panelists will reflect on some of the most impactful regulatory instruments and participatory approaches from Global South cities. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. The session is recorded and the recording will be made available online later. This is a highly participatory event. You will be soon invited to interact with us through an online platform called Slido. The link will be provided in the chat. And next slide, please. As you can see in the agenda on the screen, the session peer learning goals are to be achieved through both inspiring contributions from our panelists and interactive session with the public. Our public will be asked to interact with the speakers from the very beginning, so get ready. And you will also have the possibility to ask questions to our panelists in the Q&A. But before that, I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce you to Aziza Chowni, who has recorded a keynote presentation to set the scene. Aziza Chowni is an associate professor of architecture at the University of Toronto Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design, and the founding principal of the design practice Aziza Chowni Projects. Ms. Chowni is also the director of the Designing Ecological Tourism Research Platform at the faculty. Chowni holds a Master of Architecture with distinction from the Harvard Graduate School of Design and a Bachelor of Science with honors in Civil Engineering from Columbia University. I kindly ask my colleague to please show her keynote address, showcasing example of inclusive and collaborative design tools and games featuring the participation of children, youth, women, and people with reduced mobility.
Shauni, I'm very excited to be among you today for the Leaving No Woman and No One Behind in Sustainable Urban Development. I am a professor at the University of Toronto. I teach architecture and as well I am the head of a practice called Aziza Chowni Project. I've been extremely lucky to be working around the world. You can see here a list of my projects of different categories with different colors of green, with the focus, of course, in my home country, Morocco, which you can see here. And in yellow, the locations where I've led applied research or architecture courses at the University of Toronto. So you see it spanning all the way from Australia to South America. So I would like to start by sharing with you just 3 projects for this presentation due to time constraints. I'm going to start with one very briefly, which is Design Your Dream School in Freetown, Sierra Leone, where I was invited by the Ministry of Education to think with them about guidelines for the design of future schools. And instead of designing away in my office back in Toronto, in my home country, Morocco, I had to come to the ground to look at existing schools, but most importantly, I wanted to involve local children that use this primary school currently to partake in this design process of the ideal school, or let's say the more climate and culturally adjusted school that one could design in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And so to do that, I developed with my team a series of tools and that were targeted to different age of children. We also involved the students from the architecture schools that at the time, this was 2018, was only 2 years old since it had stopped during the Civil War. And we devised a type of snake and ladders game where students had to answer a series of questions and pull out certain cards that would ask them about how they would design the perfect classroom for passive ventilation, to protect against rain, etc. And then at the end, with all of their answers that they had to mark down on a sheet, they had to do the model of their classroom. We also wanted to include children with disability, and there was a very famous school in Freetown for blind children. And what you see here is a game that has tracks that we designed that could also be used by for other children. And with different objects so that those can be touched and their contour can be touched, understood what they meant. So trees and some games, water fountain that was extremely, important since a lot of the kids do not have potable water in their home and they rely on that, on access to potable water at the school, toilets and classrooms and admin. So they could move them freely across the board and we could understand the type of adjacencies that they were interested in and also the type of program. We use very typical techniques like you can see here with images of play, of different type of play, of items and games, and using just post-its to vote and also to mark impressions. And we asked them to also draw their day at the school. And that also allowed us to understand which activities and which issues they raised. And then we developed a guideline based on that for the Ministry of Education. The second project is this in Moinville, in Laayoune, Morocco, in the southern part of Morocco, where there is the Sahara Desert. And the project was named after Le Petit Prince, a quote from Le Petit Prince. And so the town of Laayoune, as well as those small towns, Kerj El Khil, which was a military, outpost, and Foum El Wad, with houses that were around the beach and some public spaces where people from Laayoune would come, during the weekend for some fresh air and then to swim. Those are, first of all, 3 different urban development at 3 different scales. Their urban spaces and public spaces have different characteristics, but their layout is purely European styled. So it's not at all suiting the cultural habits of the population from this part of Morocco that has a relationship to public spaces very different from the one that we Moroccans in other cities from the north have, which is, I would say, very Western, influence, but also very related to very manicured gardens. They're more connected to the raw nature and also to the use of those public spaces during nighttime. So our goal was to help the city develop guidelines on how to rehab all the existing public spaces, some that dates from the colonial Spanish era, beginning of the 20th century, and majority of them were designed in the past 20 or 30 years by the Moroccan government. And in this project, I wanted to give a voice to parts of the population that usually are never heard. So women, children, youth, people with limited mobility. And one category that I didn't add here, but we ended up adding was sub-Saharan migrants that work in the city of Laayoune and very often are, invisible in municipal affairs since they cannot vote. And we wanted to use the technique of the collage as an approach to ask the local population to change and adjust their public spaces. So we went from an interior type of workshop that we wanted to test, and collages that were analog, so with scissors and glue, and where we give just photos of the public spaces, mobile stands, also where we were going to put those collages and that would go around the city. Interior workshops with an app that we developed where you could do a type of collage. I'm going to show it to you and change and make better some public spaces that we have picked. And then also the people running the workshops, we wanted them also to have a little iPad and to go and walk on the streets and encourage people to go and talk to people, which is really part of the Moroccan culture, where Mediterranean culture, where we talk a lot. And where we have a lot of human contact and social interaction. So using this approach rather to engage mainly the younger part of the population and the older one that have more free time. And, otherwise the other people in the other workshops, in the interior workshop, we invited them via different associations. So we first studied the constraints of the site and the cultural specificities to, understand the challenges of those public spaces. Then we've developed different themes that should be addressed, like mobility, obviously public spaces, green spaces, and beachfront. So those are some key themes. And then we developed a library of different objects that people could use and to, alter those public spaces, as well as textures for the ground. And we run all these through the client and the partners associations, as well as through sociologists, anthropologists as well. We developed an app with a developer, and it's an app where one could do a collage, where people could enter their data and then would give us some statistics about specific public spaces, specific objects that were used to adjust the spaces. And we also wanted this app to do something special, which in a way to be fed a photo of the collage that was done in an analog manner with scissors and glue, and to analyze it. And then finally, we trained the people that were doing the workshop. So we didn't lead the workshop. We trained different youth and who were paid to lead this workshop, because we wanted to infuse this approach within that region, and hopefully so they will continue after we finish this project. And as I mentioned to you, there were interior and exterior workshops, some that use analog, some that use digital tools. And then we all fed this to the app and we had some final results. And then the collection of the analysis and development of guidelines for the public spaces led, and there was a phase of dissemination that of the final result that never happened because of COVID, because we finished the project in December 2019, and we're going to have the event to celebrate and share the result with the population in March 2020, the end of March. And of course, if you recall, COVID hit us all, unfortunately. In the first phase, we'd run the project in two phases. First, 522 people. The second phase, also around 500 people. This is me with our team locally. And so our aim was to touch, and we were able to touch more than 1,000 people in an urban consultation project that was like the largest of such a consultation project that was done in Morocco. Then on an urban public space, upgrade project. And this is the type of spaces that you can find now in Laayoune. So very dry, no shade. And this is an arid climate with 45 degrees Celsius in the summertime. And this is actually the spaces where the local population prefers to hang out when the evening comes. They would do tea, etc. here in the margins of the city. And those are some photos of the workshop that you can see here, where we did with the app and also the collages. Also some more photos. You can see the digital and the analog. Some of the fun results that were done with the analog. This was an abandoned military structures, housing that were abandoned and where kids love to play with their sand dunes and love to enter and play informally. Not super safe. But this place is one of the favorite play, area for children, informal play. So you see here how they changed it. I'm going to try to show you this, which is how the app was working. And of course, the app also has a gallery of all of the different collages. People could also comment on them, so you can add different objects. We have, a bunch here, like this outdoor boxing that was extremely popular among boys. Different activities, different textures on the ground. Of course, grass was used a lot, but we tried to explain that it needed a lot of water. People there were dreaming, since they live in a dry landscape, of green, but we also had to do some awareness. You could leave also information and put the type of workshop you did, if you were from which type of groups you belong to. And this is just very quickly some of the results. This was just on phase 1, where we had a lot of youth and just 11% women. In phase 2, we had more women, and it was super interesting. When we did here, I'm just showing the analysis of the analog collages, and where most of the items that were added in the public spaces were. Here's called life, but actually activities. It's about translated from French. So mainly there were a lot of activities that were missing.
Thank you very much to Aziza Shauni for this inspiring demonstration on how to transform theory into practice. And now I would like to engage with the public with a quick icebreaker. It will be done through Slido, the app I mentioned before, and you will find in the chat the link to access this participatory icebreaker. You can also use your phone if you prefer and scan the QR code which is appearing on the screen. Either way works for us, and we have 3 very quick questions for you. Just give you a few seconds to connect. Maybe we can start asking the first question. Which country are you joining us from? Maybe we can share this on the screen as well. You can find the link right now in the chat. And first question is to know where you are joining us from. Please use Slido to answer this question. It will be a word cloud of origins. Oh, I can see already appearing the names. We can see Spain, #1 origin of our public. Oh, I can see the United Kingdom as well, and South Africa. We have these are the 3 countries where we have the most participants from, but I can see a lot of countries. It's really nice to see how international our audience is. Uganda, I can see a mix of global South and global North countries. We have Nepal, Denmark, Egypt, Somalia, Portugal, France, Malaysia, and you can see that, of course, Germany, as expected, is also well represented, including with cities such as Munich, Cologne, and Berlin. You can see Malawi, Tunisia, Cape Town in South Africa as well. Well, the result seems like the 2 countries of origin with most participants are Kenya and the UK. Well, it's a good split between global South, global North, and of course, this is also linked to the time zone. Of course, it's a bit early, for example, to add the Americas, but the recording of the event will be made available with everyone. Of course, we will provide more information about that at the end of the event. We can maybe move to the second icebreaker question, and it's a quiz, in fact. What percentage of landowners globally is made up of by women. And you can choose between less than 20%, less than 10%, or less than 40%. I'll give you a few seconds to vote before revealing the solution to this quiz. Or we can see that there's the first two options are the one receiving most votes. And I can see less than 20% appears to be the number one choice. And it is indeed correct. Well done to the majority. 55% of those who voted. Less than 20% is indeed the percentage of landowners globally made up by women. Of course, then a minority. It's less than one every 6 person. We are now thrilled to have a panel discussion with 3 influential voices from organizations that are dedicated to empowering women, girls, and marginalized groups in urban planning and construction processes in cities in the global south. I would like to ask our colleagues if we can share the screens with the 3 participants in there. So okay, I can see that there is a okay, well, let's take the time to do this last question. What do you think limits women's and girls' participation in urban development processes? Last question. And we can see patriarchy as being the number one answer to this question, but there is a plurality of them. You can see low literacy rates, access to historical divisions or cultural and social norms emerges also as a main component. Patriarchy, definitely the number one, but lack of education and cultural and social norms comes right after that. Power discrepancies, low access to information, lack of childcare design choices, no access to power decision, discrimination, cultural and literacy, time constraints also emerging as one of the reasons for this limits. Yes, wonderful. Sacrificing professional life, chance, family. So it's a mix of reasons. We'll try to cover all of them. And so without further ado, I would like to present you the 3 amazing panelists we have today. We have first Ms. Bijal Brahmbhatt is the director of the Mahila Housing Sewa Trust, MHT. A civil engineer by training, she is an expert in habitat improvement, community development, housing finance, and urban climate change resilience. She oversees the MHT's operations at the national level and represents several government agencies. She is a fellow of the Humanity Foundation and of the Rockefeller Foundation Global Fellowship Program in Social Innovation. I would like to kindly ask our participants to please keep their microphone off to allow for a better hearing experience. Second, we have Ms. Ikbel Dridi, an urban planner, expert in local governance and urban development. She has worked with GIZ since 2011 as a technical expert in governance, decentralization, and networking. Since 2018, she has held the position of National Program Coordinator with the Tandem project funded by USAID and managed 2 major projects in Tunisia. Since March 2021, she serves as a Partnership and Development Advisor at GIZ Cities Alliance, in charge of managing the Femme Medina project that focuses on women integration in public spaces. And last but not least, Ms. Husnaini Sofjan, a Senior Program Advisor and Strategist with 20 years of experience Sri has worked in the fields of urban settlements, gender equality, and information technologies, and was trained in economics, political science, and public administration. In 2012, she became the first CEO of Penang Women's Development Corporation, establishing to work towards gender and social justice. Previously, Sri worked at the United Nations Women's Development Fund, now known as UN Women, at the Urban Governance Initiative, and at 2 United Nations Development development programs. Sri is currently a member of the advisory group on gender issues at UN Habitat and of the UNDP's Local Governance and Local Development Global Working Group. Welcome, Sri, Ikbel, Bijal. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for being here. And I would like to start in quite an informal way with a first round of very brief remarks from each one of you. Can you please name one thing women and girls need to participate in urban development processes? We can start with Bijal.
Yeah, so in our experience, it is actually collectivizing women, organizing them, providing them with the required skills, and then, supporting them to claim spaces with the urban local governance.
Thank you very much, Bijal. Now to Ikbel.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I think that the essential thing for women and girls need to participate in urban development process is absolutely safety and security. This ensures they can engage in public spaces, attend meetings, and voice their concerns without fear of harassment or violence. Creating safe, inclusive spaces allows them to contribute confidently to urban development decisions.
Thank you very much, Ikbel. And last but not least, Sri.
I think I build up on what Bijal was saying. I think is to, for me, for our members at Huairou Commission, is about being part of the decision-making process, where power, to decide resources, to decide the program and all that need to be, women need to be there to represent their constituency and to be mindful that women also are made up of, different intersectionality, young, old, rich, poor, educated, not educated, and so on. Yeah. So that's the most important thing, to bring the perspective that, of all the intersectionality of women in the decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri. And those are very interesting topics that certainly deserve more focus, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now with our panel discussion. And I would like to start with Bijal and ask her a specific question related to her experience at the Mahila Housing Trust. So at the MHT, you work with women's grassroots institutions. How do you reach out and connect with them, especially when they're living in poverty, to facilitate their participation in local governance and decision-making processes with their communities and cities?
So Lorenzo, I actually had a presentation. Am I allowed to present it, or do I just answer your question?
Absolutely. This is the right moment. Thank you.
So we actually, can we go to the first slide, please? So we, we work by strengthening collectives of grassroots women who are poor to improve their housing, living, and working environments. And later on, when they first start with their houses, but then move to settlements, and as they get more and more skilled and voice and agency, they start shaping the entire urban development. Can we move to the next, please? So what we do is, we will enter into communities, start talking to them in terms of what their first needs are. It will be obviously at household level initially, access to water or sanitation or better housing or land rights. We will actually, demystify the government schemes and complex urban planning procedures around that, and then give them a space to talk to the government so that they bring in largely government investments. And in developing countries, it is one by one. So first they'll get water, then they'll get electricity perhaps, and then housing. So the house at one go doesn't come. So it is over a period of time. Can we have the next, please? So what we have done is, according to the urban, the lowest, most bottom level of administrative and geographical planning, which is a ward, in India, we actually for every 100 to 250 households, each household becomes a member, and they elect a group of 15 to 20 members, which are called the community action group, which actually start doing the changes. They start with housing and move to the entire ward, which is a larger area. And once, they get better recognition, they also start working at the entire city level, negotiating with the government. Next. So what they do is mobilizing communities, surveys and need assessments, identity, and entitlement. So example, building their own identities like their social security card, because there are many who don't have that in India. And then they start creating partnerships with governments. And then they later on engage in advocacy for a city level change. Next. You can look at the extensive capacity building that we do, and this is not limited to this, but if you see, we help them do their own governance, make their own maps. We also teach them structure and functioning of urban local bodies in India. Also built on that is climate change. They make their own action plans, understand gender, governance and budgeting, and also planning processes. These trainings are not limited to this. This is just an example. So it's an extensive process. Next. If we take a settlement, if you look at the timeline, initial 6 months. Now, this is really fast because we have gained an expertise. Would go in rapport building and sensitization. 12 to 18 months will go in, building their community-based organization. And up to 24 months, it's actually building the capacity of the action groups. After that, the services will start coming. It will be household level initially. Then it will move to climate change and adaptation, because these are the immediate needs. Then climate change comes. And then probably in the 48th month, it will move to, ward level initiatives and works on land rights, and go beyond that at the city level. So this is from our practical experience that we have mapped this. Can we have the next? So you can see this is a settlement. It was like this initially. Women worked to get it. They got these electricity meters, paved roads, the water connections at household level, toilets. Next. This is very interesting, which is working at a city level for a transport route that they wanted to change. So this is the original transport route, which left out all these, economically weaker section settlements with the yellow. And when they went with applications to the government, they were really told that, we don't have land to actually, let the route go through nearby your settlements. And so what they did is they actually found out this land, mapped it. The way they understood the land is, where the waste management transportation of the municipal corporation is dumped, that is the government land. So they mapped it and they gave it to the authorities. And 2.5 years later, they got this alternative route, which was going nearer this settlements. And you can see the impact in COVID. We actually reached to 1.3 million individuals. Our staff couldn't travel, but they were the change agents in their settlements, and we just connected them to the donor or the private sector, and they organized everything in their own settlements. You can see the huge numbers we reached within a very small time. Next. So this is the impact. We have almost impacted 4.5 million women reaching at scale till March 2024. I was given only 5 minutes and I think I have completed. I think I've tried to complete within the 5 minutes, giving you the crux of our work. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bijal. This was perfect timekeeping and, of course, gave us a visibility of the intensive, highly structured work that you put in place for this approach. It's highly inspiring. This presentation, of course, will be made available at the end of the event in the website that we will provide you. Now moving to Ikbel and the Medina project more specifically. So Ikbel, you aim to integrate women in public spaces in Tunisian cities. What do women need and expect from public spaces, and what form of engagements are necessary to better implement this in urban governance?
Thank you, Lorenzo. I will share just my presentation.
Oh, Ikbel, we cannot hear you.
No, it's okay. It's okay now.
Oh, yes, we can. Yes, absolutely. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorenzo. So good afternoon, everyone. And I'm excited to share with you today the approach and accomplishment of the Medina project. So Medina is about creating more inclusive and gender-sensitive urban spaces through a carefully designed participatory approach that puts women and their needs at the heart of the process. So cities for women are inclusive cities where everyone, regardless of gender, race, class, or physical ability, has equal access to the resources and opportunities the city provides. So the Medina project is part of the broader Cities for Women program of Cities Alliance, and aims to create inclusive public spaces in Tunisia's Medina. The first phase was implemented in the Medina of Tunis, funded by USAID, and we are now expanding to 4 additional Medina, namely Sousse, Masakin, Mahdaya, and Kairouan, and it's funded by Swiss Development Corporation. So as you know, the Medina was chosen because women are underrepresented in the use of public spaces, as these areas were traditionally designed by and for men. So women typically meet in the private spaces of homes. For this, the project's goal is to create public spaces that are more inclusive and meet the current needs of women in this Medina. So Medina follows a 6-phase approach. So first of all, we engage stakeholders, including citizens, key actors. And after this initial engagement, this engagement involves identifying key stakeholders and organizing dialogues with local policymakers to understand their perspectives on women's engagement, to collect data and discuss existing policies. Next, we assess the level of women's engagement in the city using tools such as focus groups, surveys, individual I said that 2 different tools such as focus groups, individual interviews, community workshops, and the WEG profile, the Women's Engagement in City. Then we generate innovative and context-based solution by co-create the spaces to be implemented. And finally, we involve assessing the impact of pilot projects and sharing impacts and results of the project. It's crucial to incorporate gender perspectives in urban planning to create truly inclusive spaces. And I think that issues like public harassment, lack of safety, inadequate lighting, absence of public restrooms, etc., contribute to spaces that are dysfunctional and predominantly male-dominated. So our goal is to create spaces that serve the needs of women and family as a whole. So, how to create and finance inclusive public space. So, the Medina project is structured around three main components: the participatory assessment of women's need and priority in public spaces in the Medina, and the co-creation of short-term and medium-term intervention in public spaces. This is the first component. The second component is to implement a pilot intervention to enhance women's participation in the Medina, and finally, to support cities in leveraged public and private funding for medium-sized inclusive infrastructures. So I mentioned that one of tools that we used, it's the WEG, the Women Engagement in Cities profile. This WEG provides a comprehensive description of how gender responsive a particular urban area is by examining four key domains: preconditions, economic engagement, institutional and political engagement, and human and social capital. As an example, I'm pleased to present the WEG of SUS, where we can see here that safety, political representation, and cultural policies emerged as the most concerning issues for women. So once we gather the necessary data and gain a clear understanding of women's specific needs in the city, we move to the co-creation phase to generate innovative context-based solutions. The community, particularly women, actively participate in the defining policy responses and designing intervention to address the challenges identified. So this idea are then tested through pilot projects which lead to the implementation of concrete actions. So we can see here that the collaborative workshops are then organized to apply this methodology and involve diverse representatives such as women's organizations, NGOs, municipalities, university, and community association. So this participatory gender analysis is essential for exploring the existing gender role and the distribution of responsibility between men and women. To explore also the specific vulnerabilities and opportunities for women and men, girls and boys, and finally the impact of social variables like ethnicity, culture, age, and social class. In addition to the WEG profile, we used also participatory tools like gender-based community mapping, which allows local people to understand how women use urban spaces and highlight important areas such as scared sites. We used also the photo walk tool, which enable women to capture images of their city through their own eyes. Also, we use the daily itinerary map to recognize and evaluate the women's daily tasks in the neighborhood, and finally the women safety audit to examine physical environments with the goal of improving personal safety. So here are a few examples of gender-sensitive community maps developed through the project. In Sousse, for instance, the central zone here is perceived as the most dangerous for women. In Tunis, for example, the central Medina was noted is noted for its vibrant cultural and commercial activities, making it more attractive and safer for women. And here we can see that since the project is in Tunis has been completed, I would like to share some of intervention we have made. So one example here is the transformation of abandoned space into an exhibition and sales area for craftswomen, complete with wooden kiosks, a rest area for women, and playground for children. Then another intervention converted disused municipal space into a multidisciplinary training center. Yeah, I will come to my conclusion. Offering courses in hairdressing, tailoring, etc. And finally, an abandoned space also was turned into a children's playground and relaxation area for women, and as well for as a study area for nearby high school students. This is a cultural heritage trail that we created, linking major monuments in the Medina of Tunis with the intervention carried out under the Medina project. The project has been also widely communicated through publication, videos, and exhibition. And finally, as mentioned earlier, the project began in the Medina of Tunis, and now we're implementing it for new cities. And finally, in Tunisia, Cities Alliance supported municipalities to access finance for medium-sized infrastructure by co-creating this medium-sized infrastructure, integrating gender and climate consideration by developing pre-feasibility studies and technical design, and finally by identifying and applying for funding opportunities at not just national but also international level. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question you may have.
Thank you very much, Ikbel. There will surely be time to ask questions, and I believe this presentation, of course, it tells about the specific country and the specific part of the cities, the Medinas. Nevertheless, the methodology, I believe, it's quite adaptable to contexts that are sometimes thousands of kilometers far away. So we will discuss how we can make this peer learning happen, of course, in the second part of the conversation. And now I would like to leave the floor to Sri regarding more specifically the crucial role of women in urban development, which is of course widely recognized, women as agents of change, as leaders. And nevertheless, women are frequently underrepresented in leadership positions within this specific sector. So what tools and strategies can be utilized to establish partnerships, involve women in governmental procedures, and effectively position them as leaders in urban development processes?
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. And thank you to GIZ and all the organizers for inviting me as a representative from Huairou Commission to share. I think when you said, women's critical role in urban development, I think women in general are still struggling to position themselves as leaders and to get the formal recognition as agent of change. And so, I think this is a very good session where we talk about, not leaving women behind, and what I'm going to also take the time to share the strategies and process for partnership to create, a space and a structure that include women, especially those from marginalized poor communities, in governmental procedure and effective position, and effectively position them as leaders in ensuring that we have sustainable urban development. I think, listening to Bijal and also Ikbel, many of those strategies or process or even tools are common to many of us who have worked with a marginalized group. Next. So I would like to take this time to give us an understanding of key points for positioning women in urban development process, particularly with a focus on, putting them in a decision-making structure. Yeah, because women and men look and experience life differently. And this is, I think, one of the points that I think my peer panelists have yet to actually point out. Men and women live their life and have different needs in the city. So urban planning affects the sustainability, accessibility, usability, design, and quality of infrastructure, place, and process, and in the end can affect the quality of life that women and men experience, and particularly women, when the gender lens is not used and consciously used in the urban development process. Then I mentioned in the beginning also, when you asked the question, what is so important, is also the point about the intersectionality of women with different needs. So women, you can't put women in one group, because women comes from different background. Those who have, those who don't have, those who work, those who don't work, those who have full ability, those who have disability and physical challenges, those who are young, those who are old. So these are all the complexity of, the need to see there are different needs when we designed our cities, when we come up with decision-making in urban development. By including women in decision-making process, we hope policymakers can understand gender inequalities, needs when planning any intervention or initiative, avoid increasing the gap and inequality, and give women and men equal opportunity for a better life in the urban areas. People move to the urban areas expecting a better quality of life. So this is something that we really need to put and remember. And at the same time, by having women in the decision-making structure, we broaden perspective of the needs of all inhabitants, increase creativity and innovation, diversify pools of talent and competencies, hopefully also reduce conflict and improve process of decision making and make it more democratic and inclusive. So at Huairou Commission, Huairou Commission has members in 40 countries around the world with over 100 member organizations, and we use what we call the community resilience, because we want to make sure that women live in a resilient community, and I'm sharing this methodology, kind of strategies. All the previous presenters mentioned about organizing and strengthening women's in their leadership. Yeah. The second one, our strategy is to nurture grassroots women's knowledge and good practices. The third is influence building constituencies network and building alliance, and the fourth is influencing and changing public policies. Yeah, so let me go to the first one. Yeah, the first strategy, and this is Bijal mentioned this, and also Ikbel mentioned this about organizing women and building consensus on priorities. This usually takes time. And this is where sometimes government and also funders are not patient enough, because building constituencies, building togetherness, building them into a group to support and build their capacities, understand the system so that they understand information, what information to access and all that. This takes time. And this is something that, will make women be confident to sit and voice their opinion, their needs in a public structure, in a public space. And this needs training and this needs support. Yeah. So that's one area where investment needs to be made if we really want to make sure that women are not left behind in urban development. Second is nurturing women knowledge and good practices. So this is when we also, once they are confident, once they know what they want, they can initiate activities. They can start mapping their needs. For example, in the Philippines, they map the needs for avoiding or challenging the sexual harassment in public areas. They map the areas. Yeah, this group have come together and say this is a priority for our girls, for our women, and they map the areas and they come up with a strategy where they help each other to protect and make sure and engage the government and come up with advocate for a change in the policy that penalize sexual harassment, and that they successfully managed to get the bylaw passed because they work with other groups as well, and that goes to building constituencies, building networks. The other point, for example, is the group in Nepal. They are a women's group of saving groups, yeah, and they pull together all their resources and they negotiate with the government that says that, hey, we, with our resources, we can also participate and make improvement. And they started to be invited to sit in government committees. The women become very more confident, and some of them ran in the election, and they are, they successfully got elected. And a few of them are at the ward level, a few of them are, in fact, a deputy mayor, and one of them are actually now sitting in the parliament. So with that, their communities, their constituencies of grassroots women, saving groups are able to actually get their voices, get their needs recognized and recognized, and they are now recognized as agent of change. And last but not least is also bringing their voices, their representation in big public spaces, big policy spaces. For example, at the WOOF, we make sure that the grassroots women speak for themselves. The World Urban Forum, you mentioned that this is a building up to the World Urban Forum. The World Urban Forum has grassroots assemblies, women assemblies, and different assemblies. So we bring and advocate that UN Habitat support grassroots women to speak for themselves in these spaces. And not only at Habitat spaces, because urban issues are not just confined in UN Habitat, it's also at the DRR, disaster risk reduction, or the COP, Conference of Parties for Climate Change. So we do that, and we use this diamond structure to build their competencies and making sure that they're leaders. I hope that give you some ideas about how we work to ensure that women get recognition, get to be appointed, get to be nominated, get to be elected as leaders, and recognize them as individual leaders, but also the group, because the group brings the strength. Yeah. So our recommendation is to organize and to represent the constituency, women, grassroots, understand regional and global policy. So, continuously building their knowledge of global policies, regional policies, and also getting them to understand budgetary process and development, national development policy and processes, and encourage them to build alliances and networking. And Huairou Commission, as a global organization, we mediate them also by engaging them and linking them to their local government through our partnership with the United Cities and Local Government, UCLG, at the global level and also at the regional level. And that's how we hope that women continue and will get more recognition and position in decision making to make the difference in our urban development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri. You have painted a picture that shows a number of challenges, but I think I can speak for everyone by saying that we also feel encouraged by your commitment, the commitment from Bijal and Ikbel to change things. I believe that this first round of contributions, of remarks from your side, explain to us that leaving no women and no one behind sustainable urban development, it's very complex endeavor. It takes time, it takes commitment, it takes effective and context-specific methodologies. But you also embody, if I may say so, the importance of international connection, international collaborations and partnerships. You all have an international profile, not by chance, to connect those context-specific approaches with broader methodologies. And finally, this last point you were making, the importance of communicating the impact to be measured, another point that was raised before, and communicated as part of a regional and global advocacy that will find, in fact, at the World Urban Forum, one of its most important platforms. So thank you so much to our three distinguished speakers. And as you have seen probably in the chat already, there is a link you can use to go back to Slido and ask questions to our panelists. The reason why we are using this platform, it allows, in fact, for two kinds of interaction. You can ask your own questions, but you can also vote for the questions that have been asked by your peers. And we will try to answer as many questions as possible by following the order of the most voted, starting from the most voted questions to the panelists. Please feel free to write them and also address them. If you have a specific panelist in mind, you can also specify that this questions is specifically directed to one or more of our distinguished panelists. And I can see that there are already 3 questions that are popping in through Slido. And there is a first one coming from Rowena Wilson in the Netherlands. What methods can be used to analyze the effectiveness of participatory approaches in urban planning? Well, maybe I can ask this question. I can ask Bijal if you would like to answer this question, as it was part of the answer was in your presentation.
Bijal has just left the meeting. I guess she had some internet problems.
Oh, thank you, and apologies. Thank you so much for informing me. We will circle back to Bijal as soon as she re-enters the conversation. And so I repeat the question, maybe asking to Ikbel if you would like to address it. What methods can be used to analyze the effectiveness of participatory approaches in urban planning?
Thank you, Lorenzo. Personally,
Ich glaube, jetzt kannst du es aufhören zu teilen.
Sorry?
Oh, yes, please, Ikbel, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So personally, I think that to analyze the effectiveness of participatory approaches in urban planning, there is a variety of methods can be employed. For example, in our case, we used surveys and interviews, pre and post participation surveys. It was conducted with participants and with habitants, with citizens, to measure their satisfaction, understanding, perceiving influence in the planning process. We used also the focus group and interviews, not just with the citizens, but also with the stakeholders. This focus group, I think, that provides in-depth qualitative feedback on the process, and these discussions also allow for exploration of perceptions, experience, and the effectiveness of engagement technique. What else? We used also the stakeholder mapping and engagement metrics, like, for example, the WEC. So I think that the stakeholder mapping also can track which groups were engaged and to what extent. The engagement metrics such as attendees rates at workshops, number of contributions, diversity of participation. It provides a quantitative measure of how inclusive and representative the process was. We used also the participatory evaluation, involves engaging the same participants in assessing the effectiveness of the process. And this method, I think that ensures that the analysis reflects the perspective of those who were involved. We used also the community maps as tool, but we can analyze how the women used the spaces and which behavior also was used or measure the change in behaviors. What else? We can use also the GIS and the spatial analysis. We didn't use it in the second phase of Medina, but we used it in the first phase in Tunisia, Medina of Tunis. But I think that GIS helped us to map the spatial distribution of benefits from the participatory process, such as improved infrastructure or accessibility. And we can do also before and after spatial analysis of public spaces. So we can these tools can show if gender sensitive or inclusive designs results in increased usage or improved safety. So I think so.
Thank you, Ikbel. We can see it's a very broad array of tools that you have developed. And I can see that there are very interesting questions appearing on Slido. And there is one that is receiving votes that I would like to address to Sri. How do you account for the intersectionality of womanhood, i.e. avoid reducing the female experience to certain feminized realms or issues? Quite a broad answer.
I think what you are trying to say is how, or the person who asked this question is how to avoid putting women in the traditional roles, maybe, if I understand you well. I think in terms of intersectionality, to avoid putting women in a certain group or a certain role, I think we have to make sure that, you know, we understand the capability and the capacity of women is beyond this feminist, feminized realm. You know, they're not just mothers, but they are also economic contributors. Because if you put it, I hope I understand your questions when you said, you know, a feminized realm or issues, yeah. And so as in economic contributors, you know, whether you are single or you are women who are single, or you know, a mother or a grandmother, you know, they need to have access to, say, public transport, and, you know, safe, accessible, affordable public transport, for example. Yeah, safe, accessible, and affordable, you know, use of public facilities, for example. Yeah, so the intersectionality is not because women is also an economic contributor. Women is also, you know, a person who use the road, the public infrastructure, you know, the transport infrastructure. Women are also going and participate in, like Bijal said, you know, the public spaces. So public spaces is not only, you know, if you do look at the infrastructure or games that they put in a park, many of those games tend to look at the men's need rather than also the women's need. You know, so look at, you know, games and spaces that the women can also use and men can also use. And you know, we in Penang, for example, when I was working with the Penang Women Development Corporation, we did a time analysis of how much men use the public space, the recreational public recreational infrastructure, and how much women, and what are the time. And then we asked women and men who use that, you know, what are the other things that would make them use more, for example, women. And they said, you know, because if there are more lights in the evening, when we have more time, we can go there. And so this we share also with the decision maker, and looking at the different intersectionality. I don't know, I hope I answer some of those concerning points that was raised. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sri. And I would like now to ask a question from an anonymous member of the audience to Ikbel. What could be an example for medium-sized inclusive infrastructures?
Okay, good question. So, an example, okay, could be, for example, the development of community parks and green spaces. These parks could include, for example, accessible pathways for people with mobility challenges, well-lit areas, the spaces or the area for play for children, exercises for not adults but youth, and socializing for adults, for example, or elderly people. Could include also public restrooms or toilets, shaded area, for example, and seating, etc. So this is an example. So the development of community parks and green spaces would be also the renovation of local markets or municipal markets to improve, for example, lighting and security in this market, to provide sanitation facilities for vendor and also visitors, and especially for women. We can also think about providing opportunities for female entrepreneurs to participate in the local economy by an inclusive vendor spaces, etc. So this two example could be the medium-sized inclusive infrastructures projects that we did in Tunisia.
Thank you, Ikbel. I can see that you and the other speakers are providing us with a repository, an archive of interesting tools, methodologies to adapt to specific contexts. And there is now a question to Sri from another anonymous member of the audience. Can you tell if there have been improvements with women in leadership and their representation on international events over the last decades?
I think we gradually see the difference and the increase of women's leaders. However, when you are only inviting ministers or presidents or prime ministers, of course, you know, that's still a big challenge. But when we account for other leaders, other types of leaders, they have been some improvement, but you know, we need to also make more effort. I'm just taking an example again with an organization that I'm very familiar with UN Habitat. For example, UN Habitat is the main organizer of the World Urban Forum. And they are now trying to make sure that the panelists are not all men and not all women as well. So, you know, at least, you know, from one gender, from one either female or male, at least there is a more than 30% from one group, you see, for any of their panel. So that's also a commitment by the institution to make sure. Because in the past, you know, you can see, oh, we're talking, and you can see all men because it's all ministers. So even though they are trying to get all that level, they are trying to also mix so that the different perspective can come in. I just, Lorenzo, give me 1 minute to also address one question before, like, you know, the intersectionality, and Ikbal brought this up about marketplace. You see, marketplace, the need of the intersectionality, different groups of women also, you know, women need toilet, but women also bring children to the market. So we need also a changing place for, you know, children and so on. So that, and that is a design and also a commitment by the government to come up with that kind of infrastructure thinking and taking into account the intersectionality of women and also men who use the spaces and bring children or older people and so on. And also those with disability. Because in the past, you know, market usually only have, you know, toilets for men and women, and that's it. Or even, you know, in public events, places like auditorium, or even at the city hall, main hall. You know, I have gone to a city hall main hall with only men toilets. Can you believe that? And because it used to be only men who goes to the big city hall. Yeah. So these are in the process, you know, we are making changes and adapting. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sri. We have time for a last quick question to Ikbel. How do you get the local government and national government to buy into the ideas presented by Women Group? And in particular, this question is about the government land needed for the infrastructures.
Okay, so I think that it requires strategic approach. And as I mentioned that the earlier engagement it's crucial in this engagement, in this how we say to get the local government and national government in the idea with the habitants, the citizens. So we involve the local and national government representative from the start of the participatory process, invite them to the co-creation workshops, and allow them also to see firsthand how women's needs are being addressed. Build strong relationship with key stakeholders in the government, including city planners, local council members, relevant ministries, if necessary, to gain their trust. And also to understand, to let them understanding the project's value. I think that's the first thing that we should do. Then also we should align or frame the project in line with the existing policies objective. For example, demonstrating how the women's groups idea align with the local priorities, government priorities, such as economic development, gender equality, social inclusion, or even urban renewal. What else? I think also that we should highlight if there is a successful case studies. For example, in our case, Tunis, the Medina in Tunis, Medina of Tunis was a successful case study. So the participatory urban planning and women-led projects have been implemented successfully, with success. We presented this pilot and small-scale intervention to the national government and local government, and we used also, as I said, participatory approaches. I said that the participatory approaches gives also the women's group a strong voice in decision making, and shows also the government that the ideas presented are grounded in the community needs and have broad public support. Use also media and social platforms and public events to build broader community and political support. I think this is the strategical approach that we had.
Thank you very much, Ikbel. So being strategic, being able to communicate with data, a connection to the ground, these projects, to make them in a way more easily communicable and endorsable by the public leaders. It's definitely a priority. Unfortunately, Bijal is experiencing some internet problems. She was not able to join us back. But you will have access to a presentation in the website that we're going to provide you in a second. Before that, as our time is almost over, I would like to invite Sri and Ikbel to the difficult task of making a final comment on our conversation. If you have just one element that you will bring with you after this webinar. We can start with Sri.
You're asking one element that...
I know it's difficult. Yes, one element you're bringing with you, something you will think about when the webinar ends.
Well, I think for me, it's you know, the understanding of getting women into leadership position in urban development is still a big challenge and still need to be worked with, work on, and it's our responsibility, joint responsibility to advocate that and get women to be recognized as leaders and get their representation and needs, you know, included in urban development. And we have to bring this also to the international spaces and also urban national spaces, because many of you are also working with your government or have position. If you are professionals, you have position with government or have partnership with government, make sure you bring women with you and push this into the work that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri, for these inspiring words. And Ikbel, your time to share this last thought with us.
Okay, thank you. Personally, I think that we should integrate some changes into the planning process to create public spaces that are more inclusive, equitable, and responsive to the diverse needs of women, girls, and all community members. Changes like, for example, as said Shri, the capacity building of women on leadership, but also by an inclusive design, by I didn't find the word in English. I know it in French.
Oh, you can say it in French.
Prioriser.
Oh, I don't know the English translation. I'm sorry.
Prioritize safety and accessibility of spaces by the also this to integrate an economic and social spaces. What else? To by also redesign gender norms in public spaces. I think that rethink public spaces planning through the lens of gender inclusivity is the crucial thing that we should have and we should do in our cities.
Thank you, Ikbel. Very, very inspiring. And well, I am very sorry that we come to the conclusion of our webinar. First of all, allow me to thank so much our kind panelists, Sri, Husnaini, Sofjan, Ikbel, Dridi, Bijal, Brahmbhatt, and of course our keynote speaker, Aziza Shauni, for these inspiring words. There are so many ideas that we bring with us, we can try and implement together. A lot of inspiration from you. Thank you so much. You are kindly invited from now to the next webinar or Urban Innovation to Achieve Just and Sustainable Cities series that will take place at the end of November and will focus on affordable housing. On the chat, you will find the link to join the Sustainable Urban Development Community Group on Community for Dev platform. This is a knowledge sharing platform created by the European Commission to connect development professionals around the world. This is a group where you can share your interesting examples, tools, events, and we will also be posting updates on our last sessions. Finally, we would really appreciate if all participants could answer a very brief feedback questions on Slido. The link once again is in the chat. That is all for today. Many thanks to all of you for your participation. Goodbye and take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.